see it, right? That tiny little brown bird zipping through the woods. It's probably a wren. But which one? If you've ever sighed in frustration trying to figure it out, trust me, you're not alone. North America has 10 different wren species, and telling these little buggers apart can be a real head scratcher. What if I told you you can confidently ID everyone you see?
I'll be teaching you the secrets of identifying all 10 species of wrens found in North America, from the super common house wren to the more shy sedge wren. You're going to get the hang of key field marks, songs, and the habitat clues that will turn those huh moments to aha.
Hi, welcome. We're going to go through wrens. They're tough to find, and a lot of them you'll hear before you'll see. Here we go. So in North America, we've got 10 types of wrens. We're going to go through the house, the winter, the Pacific wren, the Carolina, the Bewicks, the Sedge Wren, the Marsh Wren, the rock, the canyon, and the cactus. All right, how many of those have you seen? First, on the wrens, we start with the most widespread. This is the house wren. And they're kind of jerks if you ever have one of these in your backyard. I've got a bluebird box that I tried to attract nesting bluebirds. And sure enough, a house wren will take over the box mid-nesting season, kick out the bluebirds, and just fill these holes with sticks. That's what house wrens do. They love building nests with sticks. So you'll see a box with a whole bunch of sticks sticking out of it. It's a house wren. It gets its name because it likes being around people. It makes its nest in a little house, and it is associated with neighborhoods, with backyards. It loves being in your backyard. It loves being, if it's not in your yard, on the forest edge. And what you'll know about wrens is they like being on the ground more often than flying. They like scurrying around under leaf piles, in thickets. They're more like a mammal than a bird. And the noticeable thing about wrens is their tail is usually cocked up. All the wrens we are going to look at today, that's one thing they have in common, is that tail goes straight up. So if you see a bird that's got a tail straight up, if it's not a ruddy duck, it's probably going to be a wren. So this house wren will put its tail down, and sometimes it droops down, but most often it's like this. So the house wren is all light brown, and it's got this, we call it barring, so these little stripes here on the sides and on the tail. You can see it up in this picture a lot better. It's got a very faint eye stripe that disappears in the winter. So here's in the winter there's really no eye stripe, but then here faintly in the spring, summer. And it nests, like I said, in your backyard in a box. And here's a picture of what you're like to see. Like, it's not flying, and usually not really in a tree, but on a stump or on a fence or on a leaf pile. That's your house wren. And it's got a big voice for such a little bird. They chatter, 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 chatter. Up, down bird song. Next it's an eastern bird, but it's widespread out in the east. And it's been described as a ping pong ball with wings. It's smaller than the house wren, and it's darker. And what I've discovered is it acts more like a mouse than a bird. It's scurrying on the ground in the undergrowth, and it's got a shorter tail, and it's overall darker than a house wren. And it's got a more distinct eye line than a house wren, and you can see it year round here. So you can see that right here, that faint eye line there. The winter wren. Smaller, shorter, tinier, darker. It's the winter wren. Now, out west, they've got which used to be the same as the winter wren. They split off in 2010 called the Pacific Wren. So it's also darker than the house wren, but it doesn't overlap with the winter wren. It's a uniquely western bird. There's a tiny little overlap when in British Columbia where the winter wren and the Pacific wren meet, but unless you're living in that little area, you're not going to have a hard time because they won't overlap. Now, in that interesting note, in that small area of BC where they overlap, their calls are different. So the females of the Pacific wren don't want to mate with the males of the winter wren because they sound different, and they like the sound of the Pacific wren. So if you're in that little small area, the difference is learning the call differences. I don't need to teach that here, because if you see a dark brown small ping pong with wings out west, it's a Pacific wren. There you go. And here's a good example of it sitting on a stump in the undergrowth. If you see leaves rustling and you hear a bird and it's small and tiny and dark brown, it's a Pacific wren. Quite common out west. Now we're a little bigger is the Carolina wren. And you can see on the map here the distribution. And how did it get its name? Well, look at where it's from. The Carolina forest is where it's most commonly found, but it's an eastern bird, and they don't migrate very much. There's a few in our area that stay year round, but down in the south they don't migrate like a house or a winter wren will. They're bigger, and you can see that they've got this long white eye stripe and a long bill, slender bill for picking up insects, and you can see that tail there cocked up. It's really rusty, right? Rusty and brown. I don't know, when I think of, some of those rust bucket cars in the Carolinas, maybe sitting on cinder blocks, rusting away. Well, that's how I remember the Carolina wren. It's a rust-colored, big eye stripe, and they got a loud call too. You'll hear them. The Carolina wren. Beautiful bird. Then we got the Bewick's wren. It's a southern and western bird here. You can see the distribution on the map. And it's known for its long tail. And it has this eye stripe like the Carolina wren, but it doesn't really overlap very much, and it doesn't have those rusty undertones. It's definitely got a light brown back and a beige, buffy chest. It is almost light gray. I mean, really strikingly different colors than the Carolina wren. Look at that. Really red and rusty to really pale. They like the open woods with thickets. So they want to be, they want the understory to hide in, but they also want the open woods, and they want to be near water. I've seen this out west near an irrigation ditch, so access to water, but also some thickets nearby. They used to be out east way more than they are now. House wrens have been devastating to the Bewick wren's population. They don't like them. So if the house wren finds a Bewick's nest, it will actually go in and, with those long bill, pierce the eggs so that the nest fails. Incredible predation there. Not to eat, but just to kill off the predator wrens. Interesting there. So, Bewick's wren out west. Then we got Sedge Wren. This is an uncommon eastern wren. Here you can see the map here. They breed the northern half of kind of the Midwest over to Ontario, and then they migrate from the south up to the north. So if you're anywhere in the east, you'll either get them during migration or you'll get them when they're breeding. And now this is one of two of the wrens in the marshlands or in the wet areas. The Marsh Wren and the Sedge Wren. They're both eastern birds, but they look a little different and they like different habitats. So this sedge wren, a sedge is another word for like grasses, ornamental grasses. So that is a clue on where the sedge wren likes to live and breed. It wants to be on marshes that are shallow. So not deep marshes and ponds, but shallow marshes or wet fields. They are nomadic, meaning just because they're here one year, next year they might not come back to that same wet field to breed. They'll move around based on different factors. So they're look at the streaks they have on the head, on the shoulders, on the backs, and on the tail. So it's a very streaky wren. They've got a loud voice as well, and they like perching on these sticks, these reeds. But look for the streaks, because we're gonna see here on the next bird, the marsh wren, how different it is. So they will not and aren't on marshes with cattails. So if you see a cattail and a wren, it's going to be a marsh wren, not a sedge wren. Next bird is the other marsh one. This is the marsh wren. So it's an eastern bird, but also very migratory. So it does go all throughout the U.S. and Canada, but mostly breeds in the east and then the central Canada. So it wants the deep water, so the deep marsh with the cattails, and it looks very similar to the sedge wren because it's got this streaks here on the tail and on the edges of the wings. But what it has is this big plain shoulder patch and this big plain patch on its rump. That's how you tell the difference. So if there's cattails in deep water, that's one thing, but then look for this plain patch, which makes it a marsh wren. Known for how they do the kind of the splits when they're holding on to the different reeds or cattails. And they're loud. They're loud. They chatter. And the interesting thing about marsh wrens is the males will create multiple nests and try to attract a female. Up to like 6 nests for one female. And then she'll choose one of those nests he's built to lay the eggs in. And he'll do that with like up to 3 females or 4. So he could build up to 20 nests for each of the females to choose from. Quite interesting. A lot of multiple partners, multiple nests. And they don't like other marsh wrens. So if there's 2 in the area, they're constantly going and trying to kill the nests and the babies of the other marsh wren. Wow. Not happy. Not good neighbors. That's for sure. Then we got some of the desert specialists. This is the rock wren. It's an out west bird. Here you can see on the map, mostly Arizona, New Mexico, California, bits of Oregon. And just look at the color, right? How does it blend in, right? You can see what kind of environment it lives in. The dry, the rocks. It wants to be kind of in the desert where it blends in. It lives in the rock crevices. Here's an example here. And what they do is kind of cool. They build kind of like a driveway of rocks leading up to their den. No one knows why they do it. And sometimes if they're in an urban area, they'll use man-made objects as little shiny objects in their driveway or their pavement up to their house. So you can see this rock wren. It's kind of a tongue twister to say that. This rock wren placed these rocks leading up to its home. So it gets its name from the way it moves the rocks around and the way it lives, and it's hopping around using its long bill to find insects. So it's a pale, buffy cream red with a faint eye stripe here. You can see it. You can see it a little better there when it's got its back turned. This is the rock wren. Next is the canyon wren. So also look at the map here. It's a western bird, and it has this rusty brown back and tail with a strikingly opposite all white chin and top of its breast. They live just like the way their names are in the canyon and the outcroppings, you know, all the national parks out west where you have a beautiful canyon. Look out for the canyon wren. Loud voice as well. And you'll notice here how really small the forehead is. And the reason it's got a really small forehead is because it's jamming its bill into rock crevices looking for insects. And so by having a small forehead, it limits the amount of time it whacks its head against rocks. So it's kind of a survival thing to have this narrow forehead. And they actually have never seen a canyon wren drink water. It's a survival thing when it's out in the desert. It gets all of its water nutrients that it needs from the insects it eats. So that's a interesting adaptation of the canyon wren. And the same thing happens on the next wren, the cactus wren. This is the last wren we're going to talk about. But it also doesn't need water to survive. It gets it from its insects. So this is a extreme southern U.S. And southwest bird. It is much bigger than the other wrens we've been talking about, and it doesn't look anything like it. I mean, the tail gets cocked up, but it's got that long bill, but it's got all these streaks on its belly, which none of the other wrens have. So streaks on the belly and the white eye stripe, and guess where it lives? On the cactuses. That's right. So if you see here this cactus it's standing on, quite often you'll see it like that or on a rock. And it rarely strays from the desert. And what it sounds like when it's calling is it sounds like an old car trying to, and it stops. It does that for three or 4 seconds or so. Interesting wren. All right, that's it for the wrens.
There you go. Now you've got the basics. Don't be stumped by wrens. Confidently call them out. It's going to take some practice and some patience, and you're going to get it wrong a few times. But in the end, it's so worth it to nail down this ID. Happy birding, everyone, and I hope your next walk is full of wrens.